Hello, you're watching Nightline. I'm Anita Wu. The top stories. 2020 budget, something for everyone. Our headlining story. Tun Dr. Mahathir Mohamad said the 2020 budget is certain to make almost everyone happy with something for everyone. The Prime Minister said the tabling of the 2020 budget is also a reflection that the Pakatan Harapan administration is a capable government in light of the extra funding being granted across the board.
Berpendapat bahawa Menteri Kewangan telah menyediakan satu bajet yang mencerminkan kekuatan pentadbiran negara.
Tun Dr. Mahathir said this at a press conference after the tabling of the 2020 budget in Parliament on Friday. He also said that the allocations for Sabah and Sarawak have also increased to the point that it is even bigger than what Peninsular Malaysia is getting sometimes. Tun Dr. Mahathir also said that the PH administration is still running well despite having issues with debt. He said Malaysia's economic performance will improve with the GDP growth from 4.7% this year to 4.8% next year.
Ramai yang berpendapat bahawa kerajaan Pakatan Harapan ini tidak berpengalaman dan tak mungkin tadbir negara dengan baik. Tetapi seperti mana yang kita dengar tadi, peruntukan tambahan telah diberi kepada hampir semua pihak. Dan ini menunjuk bahawa kedudukan keuangan kita masih kukuh. Obviously, our credit rating is very good because people are coming forward to offer funds for us to borrow. But of course, we have to borrow the best offer, and samurai bond will attract an interest rate of 0.5%.
During the media briefing, Tun Dr. Mahathir also said that Malaysia must resolve its property overhang problems for apartments and condominiums. The Prime Minister stressed that Malaysians will not be left out from purchasing these properties, while foreigners will not be allowed to purchase landed properties.
As you know, there is a property overhang. This is limited to flats, not houses.
Not landed property. Not landed property.
Not landed property. Okay? There's just flats, and there is a property overhang at this moment. We need to sell off this property. Of course, there will be foreign buyers, but local buyers should not be cut out just because foreign buyers are buying at the lower price flats.
Earlier, during the tabling of the 2020 budget, Finance Minister Lim Guan Eng had announced that the threshold for foreigners to purchase urban high-rise properties has been reduced from 1 million ringgit to 600,000 ringgit next year. He said this was needed to reduce supply overhang of condominiums and apartments amounting to 8.3 billion ringgit in the second quarter of 2019. However, Lim dismissed the possibility of housing developers taking advantage of the situation by engaging in high-rise property speculation in order to jack up prices. Earlier on Friday, the government proposed a budget for 2020 that is set to drive economic growth so that the country's yields can be enjoyed by all the people without compromising the government's commitment to restore the nation's fiscal health. Finance Minister Lim Guan Eng said the 2020 budget, which he tabled in the Dewan Rakyat, is a growth-centric budget with precisely designed measures to optimize the impact on economic growth, job creation and structural change. He said the budget will be implemented without jeopardizing the government's commitment to achieving gradual fiscal consolidation, despite having inherited debts and liabilities to the tune of 1.1 trillion ringgit from the previous administration. The 2020 budget, which carries the theme of driving growth and equitable outcomes towards shared prosperity, allocates a total expenditure of 297 billion ringgit, comprising operating expenditure of 241 billion ringgit and development expenditure of 56 billion ringgit. Lim said Malaysia has recorded solid growth of 4.9% in the second quarter of this year, surpassing the initial lower forecast. Malaysia's current trade account balance is also in the positive zone at 92.5 billion ringgit as of August 2019 and a surplus account of 43.4 billion ringgit. Foreign reserves stood at a healthy 431 billion ringgit. The PH administration forecasts growth to rise to 4.8% next year on the back of resilient domestic private spending. Inflation for 2019 is expected to remain low at 0.9%. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister gave his assurance that the government will strive to fulfill its promised initiatives in the spirit of inclusivity and shared prosperity. Tun Dr. Mahathir Mohamad said, despite limitations and challenges, the government will continue to safeguard the welfare of the Rakyat. Tun Dr. Mahathir explained that it is essential for the government to manage its fiscal policy effectively by finding the balance between supporting economic growths and keeping all of its debt and liabilities on a sustainable path. The Prime Minister said this in the foreword of the Fiscal Outlook and Federal Government Revenue Estimates 2020 report released by the Finance Ministry earlier on Friday. He noted that resources are limited and any allocation should be optimised according to socio-economic priorities while maintaining a comfortable fiscal space. The year 2020 will see the conclusion of the 11th Malaysia Plan. In place, it will also be the year the government sets the foundation for the 12th Malaysia Plan that is going to be premised on the shared prosperity vision or agenda. He said while economic growth and dynamism must be pursued actively, disparities in economic opportunities should be addressed to create an equitable foundation for national development. The Prime Minister said the private sector has a vital role to play in fulfilling the shared prosperity vision. Business-led initiatives in research and development partnerships, technology and skills transfer and infrastructure investment have the potential to spur development, support productivity, create quality jobs, strengthen skills and promote technological progress. On the part of the government, Tun Dr. Mahathir said that it remains committed to instructional reforms, particularly in areas related to public finances and governance, aimed at restoring public confidence in public institutions.
The Minister Lim Guan Eng did acknowledge that the investment into Malaysia has been quite significant, a huge increase of over 90%, and it shows on what Malaysia is doing. And before that, there are a lot of people telling stories and spreading news that are not true, saying that our investment climate is no good. I'm sure you'll have come across that. But nevertheless, the Minister of Finance has made it clear, and we're very happy that the results have been acknowledged, and hence they have also allocated quite promising budget for us. Of course,
yang sudah pastinya akan memberi manfaat kepada rakyat, khususnya di luar bandar. Begitu juga dengan lampu jalan kampung ada peningkatan sebanyak 42.9%. Yang insya-Allah dengan bajet ini dapat menerangi lagi harapan rakyat, khususnya di luar bandar dan di kampung-kampung.
Dan bagi kami, di pihak kementerian akan memastikan setiap sen yang diperuntukkan itu akan sampai kepada golongan sasar yang telah ditentukan. Maka dari segi governance, dari segi pengurusan kewangan dan juga strategi akan menjadi keutamaan kami untuk memastikan bahawa segala peruntukan ini akan sampai kepada golongan sasar seperti mana yang telah dirancangkan.
Begitu. Walaupun tuntutan kami lebih tinggi daripada itu, tapi dengan pemberian ini saya amat menghargai. Semoga tahun depan peruntukannya akan lebih besar kepada tentera kita yang berjasa, yang mendapat pingat jasa Malaysia dalam memerangi komunis dahulu dan zaman konfrontasi.
The The federal government is committed to enhancing the mobility of Malaysians by reducing transport costs, improving roads and reducing tolls. The government intends to invest 450 million ringgit to acquire up to 500 electric buses of various sizes for public transport in selected cities nationwide. Further support for last-mile connectivity in rural and urban areas will be established by subsidising the bus operators with an allocation of 146 million ringgit in 2020. Upgrading of the rail tracks from George Line between Halu Gilat Station to Tenum Station in Sabah has been planned at a cost of 50 million ringgit. While the government is inviting proposals for the upgrading of Ipoh Sultan Azlan Shah Airport on public-private partnership basis.
Hari lebih 300,000 rakyat Malaysia berulang-alik ke Singapura. Bagi mengurangkan kesesakan di Tambah Johor dan link kedua, kerajaan akan melabur sebanyak 85 juta ringgit bermula tahun 2020 untuk melancarkan aliran trafik kenderaan khususnya yang melalui kompleks custom, immigration dan kuarantin.
Lim also touched on the toll reduction and concessions with the goal to abolish toll collection gradually, which was part of Pakatan Harapan's campaign manifesto. He said the Cabinet will consider proposals, including those from Khazanah Nasional Berhad, to acquire or dispose of all shares of Plus Malaysia Berhad.
Selaras dengan manifesto Pakatan Harapan, rakyat boleh menikmati diskaun sebanyak 18% secara purata di semua lebuh raya milik Plus. Cadangan yang diterima hendaklah memberi impak positif fiskal dan tidak meningkatkan beban hutang dan bayaran khidmat hutang kerajaan. Diskaun tol sebanyak 18% ini akan memberikan penjimatan kepada pengguna lebuh raya tersebut sehingga 1,130 juta ringgit pada tahun 2020. Dan untuk sepanjang baki tempoh konsesi sehingga 2038, penjimatan kepada pengguna dan rakyat sebanyak 43 bilion ringgit.
The Cabinet has approved an offer to acquire 4 Klang Valley highways, namely Shah Alam Expressway, Kesas, Damansara Puchong Expressway, LDP, Sprint Expressway, Sprint, and Smart Tunnel, Smart, to be funded via government-guaranteed borrowings, with the introduction of congestion charges that will be lowered by up to 30% of the present toll rates during near-peak and normal hours and free during off-peak hours. This will provide a savings to the highway users of nearly 180 million ringgit a year, or 2 billion ringgit over the respective concession periods. Meanwhile, the Education Ministry is the biggest recipient of the 2020 budget with an allocation of 64.1 billion ringgit, 3.9 billion ringgit more than this year's allocation. Lim Guan Eng said from the amount, 735 million ringgit will be used for the maintenance and upgrading of schools.
Juga akan memberi tumpuan kepada membaik pulih sekolah daif dengan peruntukan sebanyak 783 juta ringgit pada tahun 2020. Terutamanya di Sabah dan Sarawak. Tahun hadapan, kerajaan akan membina beberapa sekolah baru di Langkawi, di Kulai, di Ulu Langat, di Putrajaya, di Pasir Gudang, di Tumpat, di Marang dan juga di Johor Bahru. Bagi sekolah kebangsaan,
for national schools, Lim said 23 million ringgit will be allocated to equip them and to ensure they are disabled-friendly. In efforts to mainstream technical and vocational education and training, or TVET, the government has also increased the allocation from 5.7 billion ringgit in 2019 to 5.9 billion ringgit in 2020. Lim said the total allocation for educational institutions under MARA for 2020 is 1.3 billion ringgit, with a further 2 billion ringgit allocated for student loans benefiting 50,000 students. The government also on Friday proposed to introduce a new band for taxable income in excess of 2 million ringgit and taxed at 30%, which is a 2 percentage point increase from the current 28% rate. Lim said this was to ensure a more progressive personal income tax structure. This increase will affect about 2,000 top income earners in the country. The government, he said, will also introduce a new digital services tax and several tax incentives and exemptions to further boost the economy. He said the digital services tax will be implemented on January 1st next year. He added, beginning January 2021, Malaysians above 18 years old and corporate entities would be assigned a tax identification number. More good news for civil servants as they now can look forward to a year-end bonus as the government has announced a special payment of 500 ringgit for civil servants of grade 56 and below. Lim said government retirees will receive a special payment of 250 ringgit to be extended to non-pensionable veterans. The payment will be made before the end of the year.
Kerajaan ingin merakamkan penghargaan kepada Angkatan Tentera Malaysia, Polis Diraja Malaysia, Jabatan Bomba dan Penyelamat, Jabatan Custom Diraja Malaysia, doktor, jururawat, guru dan semua penjawat awam atas bakti perkhidmatan mereka. Kerajaan ingin mengumumkan bantuan khas kewangan sebanyak...
Lim also announced that all Fire and Rescue Department personnel will receive a special allowance of 200 ringgit a month. The People's Volunteer Corps, or RELA, will also enjoy a higher allowance of 2 ringgit per hour, starting from January 1st next year, involving an additional allocation of 26 million ringgit. On top of that, Lim said the government would also help to ease the burden of dependents of civil servants who have died in service. He said the government will introduce an ex gratia death benefit of up to 100,000 ringgit payable to dependents of the deceased, and the annual salary movement is brought forward for civil servants who died in service before the salary movement date.
Kita lihat bajet ni, dia tak membantu golongan yang berpendapatan rendah dan sederhana. Dan saya bagi contoh, income tax. Kalau nak bantu rakyat, pelepasan diri, the personal relief 9,000 is too low.
Dalam manifesto PH dijanjikan 1 juta pekerjaan, tapi daripada angka yang disebutkan oleh Menteri Kewangan tadi jelas bahawa bilangan kadar pengangguran, termasuk kadar pengangguran di kalangan para graduan, sudah sampai ke peringkat yang agak kritikal.
Coming up after this break, more on the 2020 budget. Stay tuned. Still on Nightline and the 2020 budget. The Bantuan Sara Hidup program will be expanded to include single Malaysians aged 40 and above who earn less than 2,000 ringgit a month. Finance Minister Lim Guan Eng at the tabling of the 2020 budget said this category covers 1.1 million people on top of the existing 3.9 million recipients of the BSH cash aid. A total of 5 billion ringgit will be allocated for the BSH program.
OKU berumur 18 tahun dan ke atas dengan pendapatan kurang daripada RM2,000 sebulan juga layak menerima bayaran BSH.
He said the groups would receive 300 ringgit and automatically become Takaful My Salam policy holders for free. Lim said under the 2020 budget, 24.2 billion ringgit will be allocated for subsidies and social aid, an increase from the 22.3 billion ringgit allocated in 2019. Starting January 2020, the minimum wage will also be raised to 1,200 ringgit, but will be limited to workers in major cities in the country. Lim said this was part of a drive to modernise the labour market. The Pakatan Harapan government will also make compulsory overtime pay for workers who earn 4,000 ringgit and below. The government said under the new budget, it plans to extend and strengthen workers' rights, including extending private pension coverage for contract labourers, an unprecedented move. The policy will be limited to the entertainment industry first as a pilot project for now, but Lim said Putrajaya expects to expand this to other sectors soon. In the meantime, analysts say the higher 2020 budget is a good thing for the economy. The government's investment in infrastructure and human capital to prepare for Industry Revolution 4.0, IR 4.0, also shows that the country is ready to embrace the digital economy.
This year's budget are more focused on economic expansion compared to last year, where the government are more focused on operational budget. Looking into economic data, which is like the increasing of FDI, the export and the GDP are stable, and the account surplus looks good as well. And we have to remember, all this happened in this challenging economic environment, and the effect of external costs like the trade war and the volatility in oil price. From stock market review, sector that get benefit from this budget first telecommunication, and then the second technology, and the third sector technology construction sector.
As we know also, the budget 2020, they have 4 tracks, which is boosting economic growth in new economy and digital era, also investing in people. Okay, so we can see for budget this year, we can see the government committed to continue the previous projects. All right. For example, like the National Fiberization and Connectivity Plan.
And for social security organisation SOCSO, the government's decision to expand the Self-Employment Social Security Scheme, or SESSS, to allow other self-employed groups across 18 sectors, such as fishermen and farmers, is very much welcomed. Its CEO, Datuk Seri Dr. Muhammad Azman Aziz Muhammad, said SOCSO will use the same method introduced for e-hailing drivers after getting the minister's approval. He also applauded the government's initiative to allocate 20 million ringgit to extend the benefits under iSuri via social safety coverage under SOCSO.
We are in the midst of finalizing the order with the AG chambers, and once we get the clearance, we will get the minister to sign the order before the implementation and extension of coverage to 18 other sectors. With the allocation of 20 million, we are going to start with the registered iSuri, and we will provide the benefits which will include the permanent disablement benefit and also the invalidity and death.
Up next, police to call Datuk Seri Najib over Facebook posting against Dewan Rakyat Deputy Speaker. Don't go away. Welcome back. Still on Nightline. Federal Police on Friday confirmed that Datuk Seri Muhammad Najib Tun Razak will be called up for questioning over the Nga Koming Superfans page, which is said to have insulted the Sultan of Selangor. Bukit Aman CID's Prosecution and Legal Division Principal Assistant Director SAC Mio Farida Latrash Wahid said the former Prime Minister will be called up, together with several other individuals, to assist probe into the case.
Kita telah pun menghubungi beliau, dan beliau dijangka akan memberi keterangan dalam masa terdekat ini. Dan jika saksi ini enggan memberi keterangan kita akan keluarkan 111 atau Section 111 CPC untuk paksa saksi yang datang kepada kita untuk memberi keterangan.
The Facebook post, supposedly under the pretense that it was made by Nga, asked the Chinese, who were unhappy, to protest against the Sultan of Selangor. Nga has claimed it to be a fake account. In Sarawak, 7 individuals pleaded not guilty in the Kuching Magistrates Court on Friday to a charge of disrespecting the national anthem, Negaraku, on September 27th. The 7 were 33-year-old Andrew Chung, Kon Tai Kiong, 37, Leong Xiaotong, 43, Bak Song Sing, 44, Tan Kok Chiang and Pui Ping Ping, both 46, as well as Pang Yin Pen, aged 64. The case was brought up against them as they did not stand to attention while the Negaraku was played during a fundraising dinner held at a hotel in Kuching. They were charged under the National Anthem Act 1968 and face a maximum penalty comprising a 100 ringgit fine or imprisonment of 1 month upon conviction. Magistrate Zubaidah Sharkawi fixed November 11th for case management and allowed bail of 1,000 ringgit with a surety for each of the accused. 4 of the 21 lawyers sought by police in connection with investigations into criminal breach of trust and cheating cases involving losses amounting to 30.4 million ringgit have surrendered. Bukit Aman Commercial Crime Investigation Department Director Datuk Sri Muhammad Zakaria Ahmad said the 4 of them were however released after their statements were recorded by investigators. He added police would use all possible means, including working with the Immigration Department and other agencies, to track down the rogue lawyers, some of whom have fled the country. In Perak, a 36-year-old fisherman has pleaded not guilty at the Ipoh Sessions Court to raping his stepdaughter last November at their house in Kampung Tersusun Batu Tujuh Lekir in Setiawan. The accused was slapped with 10 counts of raping the girl, who was 14 years old in November, and is also facing 12 other sexual assault charges under the Penal Code, with the alleged offences taking place since April 2016, when the girl was just 12 years old. Charges were also carried out under the Sexual Offences Against Children Act 2017. Judge Nurashima Khalid then set October 15th for the next hearing. After this break, Japan prepares for lockdown as Typhoon Hagibis approaches. Do stay tuned. We move on to the foreign front. In Japan, the powerful Typhoon Hagibis is barreling towards Tokyo on Friday, threatening to batter its capital with the heaviest rain and winds in 60 years, shutting down stores, factories and subway systems and disrupting the Rugby World Cup and the Formula One Grand Prix. According to the Japan Meteorological Agency, JMA, the typhoon is due to make landfall on the main island of Honshu on Saturday. Although the typhoon was downgraded slightly from its super typhoon status, it could still bring severe impact with maximum gusts of 216 kilometers per hour when it makes landfall. The agency also warned that areas from the west to the northeast of the country would experience brutal winds and violent seas. The Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, meanwhile, has ordered his cabinet ministers to do their utmost to secure people's safety. Here's a sports item before we wrap. Youth and Sports Minister Syed Saddiq Syed Abdul Rahman on Friday lauded the federal government's move to allocate a total of 45 million ringgit for the National Football Development Programme. According to the minister, the fund boost is much needed for the grassroots development programme in order to produce more local football prodigies like Luqman Hakim Shamsuddin, who was recently listed among 60 of the best young football talents in the world.
Ini akan memberi impak kepada lebih 80,000 anak-anak muda, khususnya di kawasan luar bandar, supaya mereka dapat dimasukkan ke dalam ekosistem bola sepak dan akhirnya akan membantu Malaysia untuk melahirkan lebih banyak individu seperti saudara Luqman yang baru semalam disenaraikan in the top 60 global aspiring football players. Top 60. Yang lain tengok tim dari Barcelona dan yang lain, dan ada anak Malaysia bernama Luqman. Kita nak lahirkan lebih banyak Luqman, kita perlu pelaburan yang lebih besar, pelaburan yang strategik.
Syed Saddiq was speaking to the media after the tabling of the 2020 budget at the Parliament on Friday. It is an increase of 30 million ringgit compared to 15 million ringgit as allocated in the budget last year to uplift the prestige and quality of national football. The minister also praised the federal government's move to allocate a total of 40 million ringgit for the local esports industry in 2020. In total, the government has allocated 671 million ringgit for local sports, youth development. Looks like that's it for Nightline. As we wrap, we leave you with visuals of the annual Signal Festival that took place in the streets of Prague, Czech Republic. The 7th edition of this festival started on Thursday and offers 18 installations in Prague's historic centre with more than 500,000 viewers. With that, I'm Anita Wu. Thank you for tuning in. Take care.